Diwali, and whoever are watching this right now and who all will be watching it after this. I am joined by Hrishikesh Datar today. He is the founder of Vakilsearch, and with Vakilsearch, they have been incorporating companies and they have been providing legal aid to startups and businesses since 2013. They started scaling up in 2015, and they incorporate almost 10% of India's total companies every month. And Rishikesh, welcome to Backstage with Millionaires. We have had you before that as well, but today, obviously, as you know, like this is the first time we are actually doing a live interview on YouTube. And so, Rishikesh, just in a minute or two, you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and Vakilsearch, and then we'll start taking the questions.
Right. So to step back for a minute, I think if you look at India's legal tax and compliance context, we have 63 million business owners in India, right? But we don't have a centralized ecosystem for legal tax and compliance, which will help the business with various aspects of managing the business, setting up and then managing the business. So what Vakilsearch is building is, and it's always a work in progress, is India's first ecosystem for legal tax and compliance to happen on a single platform, end-to-end for the consumer on his mobile phone or his website, on his computer, with zero friction, right? So I think that's the Vakilsearch mission. It's a constant work in progress, like I said, and we are very humbled that 10% of India's companies choose to trust us for their incorporation. Personally, I'm a lawyer by training, but I wear multiple hats today, as any startup founder would tell you. Dabbling a little bit in product, a little bit on the business side, a little bit on the professional side as well. So totally excited, and every day is day one. So that's just a little bit about the company.
Correct. So first of all, till the time we have actually some questions from the audience, I will start. Like, there are certain types of companies, and right now we actually see with all the Startup India mission, the Startup India program from the government of India, we actually have seen a lot of different compliances. We have actually seen a lot of different awareness. So how do you actually feel, what has been the difference between last few years of maybe incorporating a company like 5 years ago from today and incorporating a company today? What are the different kinds of compliances which were or were not there like 5 years ago? Like, how do you differentiate the whole legal ecosystem for forming a company, ease of doing business in India? Like, how do you compare that between 2015 and 2020?
Right. So I think that question has two parts, right? So on the ease of doing business, it's a different question. And on the process of setting up a company or the basic legalities, etc., that's a different question. So I think there's no doubt that a lot of digitization has happened. Today, incorporating a company, the default way to do it is online, as opposed to maybe 5-6 years ago when people had to go. It was a process of transformation. So what had started even before that was given a lot of impetus. In the last 4-5 years, we have seen a lot of change in incorporation itself. It has, with fits and spurts. It's not been a constant progress. There have been situations. The government website, the portal has failed. There's been obviously back and forth and so on, but fundamentally, it's in the right direction. With regard to ease of doing business, I think incorporating a company is only one part of ease of doing business. Where we have seen things improve a lot is in things like labor regulations, labor compliance, where the compliances and simplicity has increased. So a lot more companies are able to comply much more easily. GST has been another game changer. So whereas service tax was obviously digitized, but there were certain complications there. The digitization has gone to a completely new level. So in fact, GST today is a huge source of a huge area where we help companies with, and that's because the digitization has been almost complete. So I think the transition has been tremendous. Having said that, as a country, India has a long way to go in terms of ease of doing business. Some of these things are in place, but a lot of what a business owner needs. A business owner doesn't just need to set up a company and file GST. They need about 19 to 25 different compliances, depending on the kind of business, right? So many of those are still not digitized. So that's still a work in progress.
Correct. So apart from that, like, how do you really see, like, is it going in the good direction? I obviously, like, I know you have touched upon this thing, but where do you see the whole digitization helping the legal side of startups?
Right. So a lot of what legal tax and compliance is using and manipulating data, right? So when you file your tax returns, you're basically using information both on income and expenses to get the best possible return filed for an individual or for a company, right? So a lot of it is manipulation of data. So the more the data is online, the more data is available in a digital format, the more the possibilities are for simplification of legal tax and compliance. So there's no doubt that digitization has tremendously helped legal tax and compliance. If you look at trademark filing, 5 years ago and trademark filing today, we have been able to completely, at Vakilsearch, completely digitize trademark filing. So it takes about a minute or two for us to file a trademark. It would not have been possible had the government not put the back-end infrastructure in place. A
Correct.
portal where you can go and file a trademark. So when I say that, we are able to do all these things and digitize stuff for our customers, a lot of this is because a back-end infrastructure is being made available by the regulatory bodies and the authorities to allow this kind of innovation to happen. So I would say that there's still some way behind an economy like the US or the UK, where digitization is maybe 1 or 2 generations ahead of us from a life
Correct.
cycle point. But I would say they're catching up.
So that's exactly another thing that I wanted to touch upon when you said that UK and the US ecosystems are 1 or 2 generations ahead of us. Is that the reason like a lot of Indian companies they choose to headquarter or incorporate their company in like a place which is outside India, be it Singapore, be it Delaware, or be it any other place? So what do you think is the main reason behind these companies? Like I think Flipkart is one of the biggest examples of a company which is based in India, having operations in India, but they are not incorporated in India. So
Right.
if you can just touch upon on that.
Yeah, so just in a simple sentence, the biggest reason is taxation. Right. So one of the benefits that you get by offshoring a company, especially when you grow, as you scale, as you raise funding, is that you can, as for an offshore company, the exit opportunities for an investor sometimes are better, especially if you're looking at targeting global markets. Then an
Mhm.
offshore, the opportunities offshore are better. The second huge benefit is if you're targeting customers outside the country, then payment options are much higher in an economy in the US. So, for example, recurring payments
Correct.
India is just about getting started with the recurring payment infrastructure, right? But in the US, it's been there for almost a decade now. So the kind of startups and the kind of options you have, right from Stripe, and multiple others, to get recurring payment easily collected from customers. Now that's a big differentiator. So India
Correct.
is still catching up, I would say, in terms of the payments infrastructure, especially for subscription-driven models. For subscription-driven models, setting up a business in the US with a bank account in the US is a big benefit to a company, especially if your customers are in the US or outside India.
Correct. So okay, so coming on the whole taxation part, like obviously whenever a startup which is new, which is like just being incorporated, which is just starting its operation, since when, like what is the criteria for them to be tax liable? Like when does the tax liability fall into a startup? Is it like the moment they start making revenue? Is it like there is, because I think there is something that even the government has said that you can have tax holidays for at least 3 years, I think, in the first 7 years. So maybe the tax liability on a startup, if you could just touch base a little bit more on that,
Sure,
if for a company incorporated in India.
sure. So there are two aspects to taxation. One is income tax or corporate tax, and the other is GST. Right. So with regard to GST, the limits are 20 lakhs and 40 lakhs for product and service companies. So until you hit a certain revenue threshold, you don't have to start paying taxes. You don't have to start filing GST. You don't have to start paying GST. Having said that, what most companies do is they register for GST and file what are called nil returns. The reason being that all of your expenses, when you get, say, assuming you have a revenue takeoff, right? Your revenue takes off in the third or fourth month of operation. Then all of the expenses where you've paid GST, you can get credit for that if you're filing returns. So a lot of
Correct.
companies immediately after incorporation choose to register for GST and choose to file a nil return, even if they don't have to pay GST. With regard to income tax, most companies in the first 2 3 years don't make a profit, right? Especially startups, because every rupee is being invested, and in fact, the founder is borrowing money to invest in the business, right? So, making a profit is not something which most companies enjoy in the first couple of years of operation. If you do enjoy that, then yes, there are multiple government schemes which give you tax benefits, tax holidays. There, the government of India is trying to copy what, say, governments like Singapore have already done in terms of tax
Correct.
benefits.
So okay, so apart from this, there is I think one more question before we actually start taking questions from the audience. So when we actually talk about different kinds of companies, we talk about LLP and we talk about private limited. I think these two are the most widely used types of companies in India. You also have like partnership firm and one-man company. So what is the basic difference between, let's say, LLP and a private a limited company, and what kind of startups need to go for either of these?
So I think the simple way, I think there's a complex answer to this question, but I'll simplify it. If you want to raise funding and if you want to build a team, then a private limited company is the way to do it. If you want to start a business along the lines of say consulting or operations where you don't want to raise external funding, at least in the next 5 to 7 years of operations, right? Then an LLP is not a bad way to do it for professional firms like consulting firms, legal firms, chartered accounting firms, architectural firms. So that's an LLP. The benefit is slightly lower compliances. So compliances are not as complex as private limited companies. Having said that, private limited company compliances have also become far simpler in the last 4 to 5 years. One-person companies are very good for home-based businesses. So if you want to set up a small business like a home kitchen, or if you want to set up a business from home where you're basically going to be a sole provider, or like a one-man army, right? A one-person company is a good way to do it. There are certain restrictions on converting that one-person company into a private limited company. So I would urge that if you're looking at raising funding in the future, then choose a private limited company option. But if you're not, and a lot of businesses are not, they want to be a lifestyle business. The founder wants to take care of herself, right? Not so much build a large team and grow the business. In that case, an LLP or a one-person company is perfectly a very good way of starting a business.
Correct. So we have the first question from Mridul Sharma, and he is asking, how can a startup save taxes?
That's a good question. So again, in terms of what kind, if it's GST, then what you need to do is really all your expenses. If you're paying GST registered vendors, you can use input tax credit to cut down your outflow, right? So you can't really, GST is completely digitized. So if you're charging a customer, you have to charge GST, right? But whatever you're paying, that can be completely set off. So in terms of net outflow, you won't have any net outflow. That's something which many startups do. It's about how you carefully plan your inflow and outflow of GST. The second thing is on your personal taxes for your corporate tax. Mridul, I would say that most companies at a younger age, early in their life cycle, they don't end up paying taxes because their expenses are more than income. But if you're one of those lucky companies whose income is higher than their expenses in the early days of your startup being founded, then you can, obviously, there are multiple rules and regulations on multiple benefits you can acquire on what to show as an expense by which you can reduce your tax rates. But you can't eliminate the taxation. So you can cut it down, but you can't eliminate it.
Correct. So I'll go with the next question, which is from Dinesh Chandrasekharan, and he says, he's asking, can Indian companies, mainly startups, use SPAC route to list in USA directly?
Yes, there are. I mean, yes, you can list in the US. A lot of, in fact, there's a proposal for even reducing the complications around that to allow Indian companies to list more easily. But yes, the quick answer is yes, but it's a slightly more complex question, so we'll have to probably take that offline. Would be happy to engage with him on LinkedIn. It's not a very direct question to answer here. I don't want to bore the other audience with the long, complicated legal answer here. But it's a good question. The theoretical answer is yes.
Okay, so Dinesh, maybe you can just get in touch with Hrishikesh on LinkedIn and you can have an offline chat. The next question is from Devrat Pandey, and he is asking, could you talk about growth in legal tech sector, which competition from startups like Lawyer and others? With competition from startups, the other startups.
No, it's amazing. So I think the legal tech sector in India has been phenomenal. There are a few companies like Vakilsearch, ClearTax, etc., who have a slightly higher revenue than the other companies in the space. Like I think he mentioned Lawyer, but I think the space is phenomenal. There are multiple great companies. When we checked last, there were about 14 companies doing $500,000 revenue or less. Right? So that's not a very small revenue. In India alone. And there are, of course, some companies we are lucky to be one of those few companies who have a much larger revenue cycle. But so there are multiple companies, almost 14 companies, which are $500,000 revenue or less. So what's happened here is, like I was saying, there's a lot of digitization. So digitization has been the driver for a lot of legal tax and compliance work to go online. And that's been driving a lot of younger even chartered accountants and lawyers who are graduating to set up small websites and take their practices online. So legal tech in America today, in the last 5 years, there are 400 legal tech companies in America, right? So in India, it's just the start. I think in the next 2-3 years, we're going to see at least 100 companies, and I'm hoping
Correct.
that there are some people in the audience today who are looking at starting up. And I'll be more than happy to help out in any way. If you need my help as someone to guide you, more than happy to do it, because the more the competition in this space, it's better for the consumer, and it'll also help in shifting the entire ecosystem online. So exciting times.
Correct. Thank you very much for that. So next question is from Ankit Golcha, and he is asking, every state has their own set of regulations and rules. How is it managed at the back end? And is it a difficult task, and can technology be brought in to secure data from government sites?
Yeah, so I think that question has two parts. The first part is yes, legal tech is one of the most challenging sectors to operate in, because the person you're dealing with is the government, right? So for any
Correct.
startup, you have two stakeholders. You have the customer, and then you have the government, right? And the government is not answerable to you in some sense, right? So when you make the customer a certain commitment, you're in some sense making a commitment that the government will also not make any changes, but that happens all the time.
Correct.
So legal tech is highly complex in this sector. Sorry about sorry about that.
Those are the perks
Not
of
able
Diwali.
to,
So
not able to regulate that. So I don't know where I got lost, but yeah, we have some pretty
legal
noisy.
tech and the government being the other party in legal
Yeah, so
tech.
the government is
That's
the
right.
other party. So because of that, because that's the case, managing customer expectations is challenging. Having said that, what you need to do is we need to build the backend platform has to be extremely robust, extremely complex, right? So
Correct.
there are, to answer, I forget the name of the person who asked the question.
Ankit Golcha. Ankit.
Okay, Ankit, there are 65,000 regulations in India. 65,000. 45,000 are at a central level, and 20,000 approximately are at a state level. So the 45,000 which are at a central level, they don't change from state to state. The 20,000 which are at the state level, you have to build an engine which can handle that kind of complexity. So that's only one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that the government websites with whom you're dealing, if those websites go down, or if those websites have an outage, or in the case of the pandemic, most government platforms are not working for the last 6 months. Off and on, they're working. So even more than the number of regulations, it is the certainty or the consistency of output at the government end. So there are multiple challenges, but I would say that's what makes the business exciting.
Correct. So we have the next question from Anushrut Khare, and he is asking, I just registered my business via Vakilsearch and smooth process, but what is next is not clear. As a startup who will be building and hiring in the next 6 months and not generating revenue, what is the next step?
Okay, so first of all, I'm glad he had a good experience. I'm excited to see an entrepreneur who's just set up. So good luck, on your journey. The quick answer to your question is the basic compliances have to start. So you need to appoint an auditor. You need to basically get your first sets of compliances done, which is appointment of an auditor, filing certain commencement of business certificates, opening a bank account. Right. So those are the
Correct.
first set of compliances you need to do. And after that, if you're looking at hiring over the next 6 months, I would basically advise. I don't know the business so well, so it's going to be a little primitive advice, but I would say protect your IP, protect your intellectual property, protect your trademark, your copyright, and your patent, depending on what the nature of the business is. And when you get into your contracts, your first set of contracts, have them looked at by a professional, not necessarily by Vakilsearch, but whoever you trust, right? In terms of looking at those contracts and getting the right kind of professional advice, because it can be very helpful in the long term.
Correct. Thank you for that. So next we again have Dinesh. And he asks, what is the difference between authorized share capital and the paid up capital?
That's a good question. So I'll give you a simple answer to this question. So authorized capital is the capital which you are permitted, or you are starting the company with a permission to subscribe to. So what happens when you set up a company is you have to subscribe to that share capital, right? So you're setting up a company which is, in some sense, it's a bare shell. And then you're saying that, okay, 1 lakh, if your authorized capital is 1 lakh, then 1 lakh worth of equity can then be subscribed for, right? Typically, in the early days of your business and with recent regulations, whatever you're authorized, whatever the capital you're starting the business with, that amount of money has to be deposited in your bank account when you start the business, because the government wants to eliminate or reduce the chances of shell companies which are
Correct.
just companies being set up but without really a business intent. So when you put in that money into the bank account, you're basically paying up or paying for that capital. So
Correct.
most what people sometimes don't realize is that a company is actually a separate person. It's a separate entity, right? So when you set up a company, it's like you're creating a new person. It's like putting a baby into the world, right? Now that baby is born with infinite potential, right? But you need to put clothes on that baby. You need to give that baby food, and you need to nurture it, right? So that baby is the authorized capital, and the food which you
Correct.
give the baby is your paid up capital. Over time, you'll keep subscribing to the capital of the company.
Okay, that was a really good example. So next question we again have from Anushrat, who is asking, what are the benefits of registering in a government scheme like Startup India? So I guess a lot of companies are doing these kind of registrations today. So yeah.
So there are a lot of benefits. A lot of benefits. Starting from in the pandemic right now, there are access to loans from an organization like SIDBI, Small Industries Development Board of India. Right, those are benefits which are available to startup India registered companies. Then, in terms of filing for trademark, copyright, patent, especially for patents, there are benefits given in terms of your government filing fees, right? The third benefit is in multiple government schemes at a state level also and at a central level, you're given preferential treatment when you apply, and you're a Startup India
Okay.
registered company. So the benefits keep on changing, but I would say that the patent access and access to funding, those are two clear benefits.
Okay. So yeah, we have someone called Loin Gamer, and he is asking why OPC one-person company need to convert into private limited after a certain limit. Why he cannot do business alone with such a higher limit. So I don't know if there is a compliance like that, but
Yeah,
yeah.
there is. So the reason is that what the government, like I said, a company is a separate individual, right? One person company, that individual is the person who started the company. So a one person company is actually like a hybrid between a proprietorship and a company itself. It's
Correct.
like a proprietor who is forming a company, but the company and the individual are the same. In a private limited company, the company and the individual are different, right? So if you take the example of somebody like, I'll take an example of Vijay Mallya, right? So Vijay Mallya's company is United Breweries, but United Breweries is a separate person. So when United Breweries owes money to banks, it is theoretically not possible for them to take Vijay Mallya's personal assets to pay off the banks, right? But when a company's size increases, what the government wants to do is they don't want a lot of people to be exposed to the risk that this person will, shut down the business but not pay people back their money. So that's why you need to mandatorily transform your company from. There are restrictions, there are regulations around it, obviously, but beyond a certain limit, an OPC has to convert, and OPC has to take on the liabilities and restrictions of a private limited company.
Okay. Thank you very much. So next is from Harshit Sharma. Can we run a startup without legal work?
Well, it is possible theoretically to run a startup with minimal legal work. I won't say with no legal work. So you can run a startup by just maybe setting up a business and doing your basic ROC compliance, your accounting, bookkeeping, and basic ROC compliance, which is not very expensive anymore in India, right?
Mhm.
So you can do it with very minimal compliance. And if as your business complexity grows, you cannot avoid compliance. For example, if you want to set up a food business, then the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, which is FSSAI, right? You need to get a license from them. If you want to set up an import-export business, you need to get an import-export license. So some compliances, some complexity you cannot avoid, but you can be smart about it. So you can, be smart about it in terms of if you're setting up, say, a software consulting business, a lot of compliances don't apply to you. But if you're setting up, say, a fintech business, a lot of compliances apply to you because you're dealing with other people's money. So it is
Correct.
possible, but you need to choose the right kind of business. You cannot set up a fintech business and say, I don't want to be compliant, because that's not possible.
Correct. So next question is from Anshuman Vaidya, and he is asking, at what stage should a startup be connected with all the, should be concerned with all the documentation and paperwork?
So what happens with most companies is that at a very early stage they're not concerned, right? Because the founder is struggling to, the founder is only cleaning the bathroom, the founder is only ordering the newspapers, the founder is only writing the code. So the founder has no time to think about legalities. But what
Correct.
happens in a lot of cases is as the business grows in size, at a certain point it's like building a business on a weak foundation. So at a certain point, then you have a lot of difficulties because say you have hired an employee for 4 years and you have not filed your PF and your ESI, right? So then backdated compliances have to be filed with huge interest and penalties. So what I would advise, I forget the name of the questioner.
It is, I'm sorry, one second, Anshuman.
Okay, so what I would recommend to Anshuman is, you can't avoid it. Unfortunately, it's part of the governmental process. So, but make sure that you get the basics done at every stage. So when you have 0 to 10 employees, at least get your basic accounting, bookkeeping, and ROC filing done. When you cross 10 employees, at least get your provident fund, ESI, those things. You start setting it up. Right? As you cross 50, 100 employees, get intellectual property protected, get your website protected, get your documents drafted properly, and so on and so forth. So keep an eye on it, like you brush your teeth every morning. It's not there's no obviously you'd rather be writing code instead of brushing your teeth, right? But you need to spend that 5 minutes because otherwise you're going to have a lot of other problems which you can't avoid.
Correct. So again, we have a question from Mridul, and he is asking, what is the procedure for getting a loan for a startup? Will the CIBIL score be seen of the individual starting the company?
So if your startup doesn't have a business history and you're raising money from a fintech company, right? They would look at the CIBIL score of the individual. Again, it depends from fintech company to fintech company. If you're raising money from a bank, then banks require a guarantee. So if you're looking at any loan where there's a guarantee element involved, either your personal guarantee, in which case your personal CIBIL score is very important, or you have to give a guarantee like a property. Your parents' property or your wife's property or your husband's property. You need to put some guarantee down. For unsecured loans where there's no guarantee provided, then it really depends on your personal CIBIL score. And again, fintech companies have a lot of ways of going around that. So,
correct. So again, we have a question from Sparky Gaming. Why incubators ask some refundable money from an entrepreneur to admit that in their center?
got it. So, not able to answer that question actually because I don't know which incubator he's referring to. Most incubators, they just collect money to show intent, right? Because they want to see that the founder is serious about the business and about getting into the incubator. They don't. It's not really that they want to make money from the founder, but that they want to establish that they're getting serious people into the business. It's like you don't respect something which is free. Similarly, you don't respect the incubator if it's completely free.
Correct. So next question is from Shivan Nair, and he is asking, what happens whenever there is a trademark dispute between two entities?
Got it. So there are two kinds of trademark disputes. One is a trademark objection. Second is a trademark opposition, right? Because there's a dispute between two entities. That is like your company, Prithvi, and my company are having a fight over a trademark. That's called a trademark opposition, right? So basically, you need to present evidence that you are using the trademark before me. I will present evidence that I was using the trademark before you. Then there's a hearing before the trademark registry, and the trademark registry decides whether you get the trademark or I get the trademark. In the case of a trademark opposition, obviously only one of us can have the trademark unless we mutually agree to settle. And I say, okay, fine. Assuming your trademark is BMW, my trademark is BMV. Then I say, okay, I will change my trademark from BMV to QMV, right? So there's no similarity to BMW. So you keep BMW, I keep QMV. So that's how many founders sort of resolve the disputes between each other. And you would have seen so many examples of this happening.
Okay.
In case a dispute happens with the government, where the government is saying that no, this trademark is not genuine, it's called an objection, a trademark objection. In that case, what happens is you need to file a reply to the government, and in most cases, the trademark is granted because the government just wants to check that you are a genuine trademark provider.
Correct. So we do have next question from Imran Khan, and he is asking, what are the minimum compliances for an EdTech startup?
Got it. So EdTech startups are divided into three categories. There are EdTech startups which are, I mean, again, it depends on the stage of learning. So you could have a White Hat Junior, which is a completely online platform for very, very young individuals who are looking at getting into coding. So it's a very niche kind of ecosystem, which is not really an education replacement, but an education supplement, right? And then you would have something like a Byju's, which is far wider. So Byju's is almost like a digital school, right? So you're doing a lot of what a person would do in school, you're doing it on a platform like Byju's. And the third is not really connected, not really education in a standard sense, but it's more a digital content delivery ecosystem where there's no to and fro, but it's more digital content delivery. YouTube, for example, is the world's oldest EdTech startup because something like the Khan Academy was on YouTube for more than a decade now, right? And Khan Academy is an EdTech ecosystem. So if your basic business model is you're providing education and information on a digital platform, then you obviously need to protect your intellectual property. That's more for yourself. You need to have the basic guidelines around free speech, around hate speech, around racism, around bullying, around graphic violence, around child pornography. Those are the basic things which you have to protect against, and you have to protect your viewers against, because someone should not come on your platform and then do something which is racially abusive, sexually abusive, child pornography, those things. Apart from that, your business setup has to be perfect. So you basically have to ensure that your business is set up the right way. It could be a private company, it could be an LLP, it could be a one-person company. Also, if it's a one-man army like Khan Academy is a one-man army. So and then obviously, if your business is a non-revenue entity, you're not doing any revenues, then you don't have to file for GST. And if it's just purely charitable, if it's charitable, you have to also file what is called you can file a Section 8 company, which is not-for-profit company. So you don't want to make profits out of it. You just want to reinvest that into a trust or a not-for-profit company. So there's a separate route for that. So to summarize my answer, if you're a profit-oriented company, you need to set up the company. You need to ensure that all your content is digitally protected for intellectual property, and you need to ensure that there is a proper moderation for preventing any kind of offensive content going out into the internet. If you're a not-for-profit company, there are different rules for that, more around how to ensure that your business is set up, and then there are guidelines around if you're a trust, then you need to have a certain number of trustees, you need to have a trust deed, and so on. If you're a society, then you need to have a society charter, you need to have society bylaws. If you're a not-for-profit company, then it's called a Section 8 company, and there are rules for that too.
Correct. Next question is from Simulated. Can I start my homemade craft selling business by selling products in my college without any company registration?
Yes, you can do that. You can do that. Your business will have to be for cash, so you have to sell your products for cash. You can start it as as a completely off the books kind of business, and most companies start like that. They start with me selling something or a founder selling something basically off the books. So there's no doubt that you can do that. Just be mindful that if your business starts scaling, then look for it. If you're making hundreds of rupees a day, then no problem, right? Do it completely. Do it like a side business. Do it for pocket money. But the moment your business starts growing into thousands or into lakhs, then think about regulation. Think about how you would protect yourself. Because, like I said, in the early days, you don't want but some of the best ideas. So you'll be amazed that the Nike logo, right, was bought by the Nike founder for $40 or $50. And the Nike logo today is worth billions of dollars. Right. So there's no guarantee how big your business is going to become, and I really want your business to become really huge. So just remember that it's better to protect the business early. Buy the domain name at least, right? Protect your trademark. Do the basic stuff so that tomorrow if your business scales, you don't want to be in a situation where somebody's copied it.
Correct. So we have the next question from Ankit. Is it beneficial to split business into separate entity to stay below government thresholds? Example, if Vakilsearch's CA vertical is having high revenue than other, it will avoid tax on yet to grow business.
Never. Don't do that. Because, honestly, there is a rule in law that what you cannot do directly, you cannot do indirectly, right? So directly, can I break up my business and say that, that business, that's my business, but, that's a low revenue business. So you can't do that, right? So there is, so one thing you need to remember is just like a business wants to make money, the government wants to make taxes, right? So while your business is small, nobody will bother you. But as your business starts growing a little bit, then one day you will get a knock on the door, right? And then from the beginning, all your revenues will be made accountable. So
correct.
I would say that definitely don't try to do that. It's not a good idea. And it is something that I would definitely not advise you to do.
Okay. So we have next question from someone called Motive UPSC Circle. Hi Prithvi, I want to know what should be starting areas that startups should look to avoid any legal action in terms of text, employee property, etc.
Sorry, in terms of what tax,
In
employee.
terms of tax, employee property, etc.
Right. So I can see a lot of questions around avoiding legality, right? So I assure
Right.
you from the bottom of my heart that I'm a lawyer by training, but it's a very unpleasant area. Right? Nobody wants to get into legalities. You want to focus on the business. But my simple message to you would be that uh, it's like sun's rays. You can sit inside your house and draw the curtain, but then you will not grow. You will not be able to do anything, right? So if you want to actually set up a business, you can't avoid the legalities. The best thing to do is to wear sunscreen and to wear dark glasses, right? So you can't run from the sun, because think of the government like the sun. You can't run away from the sun, but you can protect yourself by doing simple basic stuff. So I would say, don't think about how to avoid taxes. Think about how to make your business really big, and keep your business with basic compliances so you don't have any penalties tomorrow.
Correct. Uh, so we have next question from Shivan. What are the legal steps of getting funding for a startup through crowdfunding platforms? Can be equity or debt.
Right. So there are restrictions around raising equity funding through crowdfunding platforms. Right. You can raise. There are crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter, and there are Indian. I can't remember the name of the business, but there are Indian alternatives to Kickstarter as well. Which you,
Keto, there is one.
sorry.
KETT.
Yeah,
KETTO.
correct,
Keto.
correct. So there are a few Indian companies, and I would definitely urge you to try an Indian company, right? So help Indian businesses. So try a platform like Keto, try a platform like Kickstarter uh, to raise funding. If you're a small business owner, you can also use a social commerce platform to make money, where you can actually promote other people's businesses and make a referral income. So there are a lot of ways in which you can use crowdfunding or crowd-based revenue generation mechanisms. So what are the legalities around it? There are no legalities. But remember one thing, that whatever you collect from the crowdfunding platform is treated as your income.
Okay.
So you will need to show that in your tax returns, you will need to show that in your GST returns, and you'll need to pay GST on that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anushrut asking, what are some possible questions angel investors ask when they have an intent of investing in you? And I heard things like founder agreement is often asked. What else?
So the founder agreement is when they have decided to invest in you. So once say Prithvi, if you wanted to invest $5 million, right, in Vakilsearch, you would first ask questions. No, let me just make this interactive. So if you were, the first thing you would think about is the business, if I'm investing $5 million, is this business going to be worth $100 million in the future, right? So what is the addressable market? What is the size of the market opportunity? Are you guys chasing $1 billion opportunity or a $10 million opportunity? The second thing is, how different is this business from other businesses in this space, right? What is the differentiator? In today's world, technology is the biggest differentiator, but it could also be the unique product proposition, right? So BlackBerry was a technology-driven business differentiator, but if you look at McDonald's, right, their business process is a differentiator. So you can get a high-quality burger in 1 minute. That's a differentiator. So your differentiator can be product, it can be technology, it can be process. And the third
Right.
thing is, what is the skill of the founding team, right? So many companies, many angel investors invest because you've got a great co-founder or a great founding team, because they know that once the one thing that every business makes is mistakes, right? So or if you have some experience, then Indian investors are more eager to trust you, because a lot of the mistakes have already been made and you have learned from those mistakes. So these are the three things. One is market, other is differentiator, third is team.
Okay. So we have Nitai who is asking, what are the minimum required documents, legal and financial, during the initial days?
So your incorporation certificate, your profit and loss account and your balance sheet on an annual basis, your chartered accountant's audit report, your ROC filing document. Then if you have more than 20 employees, your ESI and PF returns, basically your provident fund and employee state insurance documentation. And depending on the nature of business, your local compliances. So if you're, say, you have a shops and establishments license, if you're based in, say, Karnataka, right? You have a local shops establishments license. You would have local business specific compliances like your import export license, so on and so forth. So there'll be more business specific compliances.
Okay. So we have next question from Shivan. A rapid fire question. What does the term money and personal finance mean for you personally?
So what does money and finance mean for me personally? Rapid fire question.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what is mentioned.
So money is fuel and finance is options. So money is fuel for any business and finance is about how you choose to spend that money. So it's about options.
Correct. Rajat is asking for Agritech startup, what kind of legal permissions are required?
It's a very good question. So Agritech, because of the highly regulated nature of the business, right? So now, in the recent past, we have seen a lot of the mandi system being deregulated. But
Yeah.
before this, every Agritech startup, in terms of procurement and distribution, there were a lot of local compliances around whom you can buy from and whom you can sell to. So that has obviously reduced a lot in the recent past. Apart from that, a lot of the compliances are actually the same. So you need to have all your financial books in order. You need to have all your corporate books in order. You need to make sure that all your ongoing compliances are taken care of. And then at a state level, there's something called a krishi, right? So I won't go into too much depth here, but there are krishis, there are mandis, and there are local areas where you're allowed to sell your produce. So you have to actually, and in some cases, you also need to take panchayat approval if you want to set up and operate. For example, a cold chain. If you want to set up a cold chain process in in a certain village premises, you need to take panchayat approval. So I would say that, and obviously we can take the conversation offline, but there are local and state specific compliances which you need to follow.
So I actually have a add-on question on that because they are procuring and they are actually distributing the produces. Is a Agritech business considered like an e-commerce business? Is there any similarity in that, or?
No, so Agritech actually can be anything. Agritech can be e-commerce, whether it's you're in the business of procurement and distribution. So now
Correct.
you're setting up a business where you procure from farmers and sell to a company like Reliance, right? That could be a business. Or it could be a fintech play where you're actually lending money to farmers to fund their crop life cycle. Or
Correct.
it could be a logistics play where you're helping farmers with last mile delivery. Or it could be energy tech play where you're helping farmers with energy supply. Right? It could be one of many kinds of businesses. So when you say
Correct.
agri-tech, it's actually a very complex sector in the sense that there are many ways in which you can do agri-tech.
Thank you for that. Next question is from Satvik, and he is asking, I'm trying to start a startup in food delivery, selected for STPI contest also. Now I'm willing to start on my own. How can I start now? What are the first things to start and how to protect it?
Got it. So there are two parts to this question. The second part is how to protect it, right? So if you're starting through STPI, I'm assuming that it's a technology-based startup, and he's doing something in the technology space where he has a unique idea. So my suggestion would be think about at least applying for what is called a provisional patent, sorry, where you apply for a patent for your idea for 1 year. The second thing is, so that's on the protection side of it, and a trademark for your brand if you have a brand. A Satvik, right? So
Yes, Satvik.
the other thing I would recommend for Satvik is, depending on the kind of business, either start an LLP or a private company. If you want to raise funding, then a private company. But if you want to get into more consulting kind of business model where you don't want to raise funding, your clients are going to be paying you, and it's highly profitable business, start an LLP.
Okay, so next question is from Ankit. What was the most difficult part when starting Vakilsearch?
So product market fit. So when we started Vakilsearch in 2013, 2011, 12 was in fact the first year of incorporation, right? So 2012, 2013, they were very early days for India's ecosystem as a whole. So in terms both of the payment and innovation, so the biggest challenge was collecting money, if you ask me, right? So there were very few debit cards, very few credit cards. There was no UPI, there was no fintech, there was nothing. So businesses, in fact, we used to use a company called Gharpe, and we used to have cash collection and cash deposit in our bank account. So that was the first early stages of business growth. The biggest challenge I would say for a business is building alignment and building a single vision for the team. So as the business grows in the first 0 to 20, 0 to 10 and 10 to 25 employees, everyone, all the employees' names, all the employees' history, all the employees what their birthdays are. You have joint meetings, you go for dinners, you go for lunches. It's one big family. From 25 to 100 employees, then you have managers, right? And you're hiring people whom you don't even know. From 100 to 500 employees. So today we're at close to 400 employees. So at 100 to 500 employees, then you lose touch with the business. You lose touch with your team, right? So people are joining only for a salary. And that's when the founder and the founding team's job is super important to keep on reminding people of why they joined your company, right? So I would say that, like any company, we are not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes, but we're trying very hard to talk to our team about what is the vision, what is the mission, why Vakilsearch is making a difference in the world. And if you ask me, that is the single biggest challenge. It's also the single biggest opportunity. So if you do that very well and you convince your team that, look, this is a great place, you're going to learn something phenomenal, you're going to grow, then that is the biggest challenge. And that's also the biggest opportunity.
Correct. So next question is from Sivam, and he is asking, what are the basic compliances for startup in consumer electronics domain?
Got it. So in consumer electronics, if your business is in retail and distribution, where you're actually going to be storing consumer electronics, you have to get basic Shops Act premises licenses. You have to make sure that your business is protected by the basic Shops Act premises licenses. I would urge you to get, this is not legal, this is more on the business side, to get very strong insurance coverage. Because anything where there's a high amount of inventory being stored in one location, the business can get wiped out if there is a tragic event, right? Like a fire or water or theft or whatever. So get very, very good insurance cover for your business. Other than that, the basic setup compliances are similar. There's no difference. If you're located inside an export protection zone or inside what is called a special economic zone, like an SEZ, then you have specific SEZ oriented compliances, which are also applicable. So then there are export protection zones, there are free trade warehouses, right, attached to the port, where you're bringing in goods from, say, Germany or China or wherever, and then shipping them into the Indian market. Now, there are all restrictions around, there are regulations around that. So I don't know the nature of the business, but then there's some complexities. I'm not saying it's too complex, but there are some complexities.
Okay. So next question is from Shiv Shankar, and he is asking, if I want to create fund to invest in small tech companies, what important things should I keep in mind and what to look for and to prevent any kind of fraud?
Right. So they always say that you should. I'm not an investor myself yet, so I do provide some mentoring and some guidance to companies. But what I would just give him as maybe 35,000 foot level feedback is that stick close to what your area of expertise is. So if you're a company startup founder who started something, say in pharma tech, or sorry, in pharma, in medical, in med tech, right? So if you're setting up a tech incubator, set up a tech incubator which is connected to your line of expertise, because that's an easy way for you to prevent fraud. So you want to really understand the business at a very grassroots level, or you build a team of advisors who are capable in multiple areas. So that would be my first sort of, again, 35,000 foot level feedback. And second is, do a lot of questions, very deep questions, to see if the startup founder, has really got the right team, the right product, which is different, and the right kind of attitude around building businesses. So those are some questions which I would, again, I don't know the vision very clearly, but this is what I would share.
Great. Thank you for that. We have next from Yashash, and he is asking, what about Aerospace Startup? How do you register a company and raise funds and also legal permissions?
So aerospace is a highly regulated space. So what's the name? Sorry, Yashash.
Yashash.
So yeah, aerospace, again, it depends on the sector. So if it's in civil aviation, right, very tough, very tough. Civil aviation is one of the most regulated, most complex, sectors to start in. Taxes are extremely high, and although the government keeps talking about Udan and multiple other schemes, it's a very highly regulated industry to be part of. If you're in aerospace on the software or the technology side of things, where you're providing aerospace, you're providing digital solutions for aerospace companies, then it's much less regulated because the risk is not in your hands. The risk is being taken up by if I'm supplying software to Boeing, right? So you know what happened with the Boeing Max, right? So the Boeing Max, a lot of the software was written by multiple companies around the world, right? So those companies are basically tech companies.
Correct.
Boeing is an aerospace company, and the liability is with Boeing, not with the tech company, so to speak. So what I would advise you is if you're getting into the software side of aerospace and aeronautical systems, then regulations are not too high, not too severe. If you're getting into manufacturing, like you're manufacturing aircraft or you're manufacturing airframes or you're getting into civil aviation, that is transportation of transportation of human beings, highly regulated. So I would say that you need to really get the best legal help. Otherwise, it's going to be very challenging.
Great. So next question is from Sparky Gaming, and I just registered my idea in government incubator. They catch my idea and ready to admit me and help me to build my company, but they ask 10K refundable money to add in their account. I'm just confused whether I should go ahead or not.
If it's a government incubator, I mean, see, an incubator you should not judge based on the refundable deposit. You should judge an incubator based on who are the people in the incubator, right? I would recommend an incubator called Upekha, which is based out of Bangalore, a phenomenal incubator because they have great people. So similarly, look at who the incubator has in terms of mentors and advisors and guides. That is more important than whether they take a deposit or not. If the incubator has phenomenal people, then even if it's 1 lakh rupee deposit, I would deposit the money because you will avoid a lot of mistakes which a company would otherwise be making in the early days.
So next question is from Vishal, and he's asking: does starting all fintech startup category, regardless of lending, investment, etc., need approval from RBI?
Yes. So if you're making any kind of lending to any company, if you're going to be lending money, you need approval from the RBI, regardless of whether you've raised funding or not. Right? If you're going to be accepting money from customers and holding it, not this is very different from providing a service. So say your local Bhelpuri provider accepts money and gives you Bhelpuri, right? But what a fintech company does is they accept money and they store it, they hold it like a bank. So if you're accepting deposits or you're making loans, in both those cases, you need to get what is called a NBFC, depending on the nature of the business, obviously, non-banking financial institution compliance certification from the RBI. So that is mandatory. You cannot do it without that. In
Okay.
fact, some companies like Paytm have gone for a full-fledged banking license. But as a young startup, you have to get compliance, you have to get protection, yes, you have to get license, yes.
So next question is from Nitai. Any specific legal process or documents to start a healthcare startup?
Okay, so like EdTech, right? If you're in healthcare, it depends on the nature of your startup. So if you're in providing diagnostic support, or if you're in providing what is called a pathological lab, which is basically collecting samples, doing blood tests, and so on, that's one kind. If you're in actually providing medical care, like a hospital or a clinic, that's a totally different kind. And if you're in basically in providing data and technology solutions, that's a third kind. If you're in pharmaceuticals and providing medical medicines or in medical research formulations, that's a fourth kind. And if you're in providing home health care, that's a fifth kind, right? So depending on the nature of the business, there are of course multiple unique business specific compliances. So I can't answer it for all kinds of business, but depending on the nature of business, the level of compliance varies. So obviously, a hospital and a drug manufacturing company has the highest compliance. So if you're manufacturing and selling drugs, there are multiple regulatory bodies. So there are bodies in India, there is a body in the USA. So depending on where you want to sell the drugs, and you
Correct.
need to get regulatory approval. It's a very complex process, very complex process. If you're in the generics business where you're basically taking somebody else's formula and you're reproducing it at scale, then you don't need that much compliance, but you will still need to get a lot of protections done because medicines are one of the most regulated sectors in the Indian economy.
Okay, so we are almost around the end of the session, so I'll take maybe 3 or 4 more questions, Rishikesh. What about the legal perspective of a crowdfunding startup?
It's
Sriram had
excellent.
asked this.
It's excellent. It's excellent. So crowdfunding, if you look at the US, right, Kickstarter is a multi-billion-dollar business. In India, we have a few companies which are getting into this space, but crowdfunding is a great, great business. It's a sunshine business. A lot of businesses, a lot of innovation is going to happen around crowdfunding. So I would tell Sriram it's a great idea.
Okay, so what are the legal compliances for starting a software as a service SaaS company? Shiv Shankar is asking that.
So software as a service actually can be any kind of business, right? So you can have a med tech startup which is software as a service where you're providing medical solutions online. It could be a legal tech startup like Vakilsearch. It could be a net tech startup like Byju's. So there are multiple businesses. So depending on the nature of business, you have to have obviously business specific compliance. But one thing which a startup would need as a SaaS company is if you're looking at a global audience, you need recurring payments. So then what I would urge is if you're looking at recurring payments and consider setting up a company maybe in the US or in Singapore because it's a little easier to collect recurring payments.
Yeah. Oh, there was some background noise coming from your side. Okay, so Ankit is asking if you had to start Vakilsearch all over again, what would be the things that you would do or approach differently?
That's a very good question. I think we can end with this question because it's a very good question. So the first thing that I would do is, and I use this phrase talent density. I would urge you to read this book called No Rules Rules by Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix.
Correct.
So talent density, right? Getting the right people on board and not settling for people is the biggest difference which will make your company a unicorn or will keep the company a 2 member or 5 member startup, right? So getting the right people on board is the first thing that, and we made a lot of mistakes, right? So we are all still learning. So building a great team is the first thing that I would do, and I have obviously learning, so I would focus on ensuring that everybody in the core team is absolutely phenomenal.
Correct.
The second thing that I would do is focus. Choose one or two, lines of business and go deep into that. Build a product market fit, and then expand into other lines, other geographies, other areas of business.
Okay, so yeah. So, because a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs are watching this, and a lot of people who are just starting out or who are just planning to start, what is your message to those people now that you actually have been a part of the startup ecosystem? Both as building Vakilsearch and both also like helping other companies to start up. So, what would be your advice to people who are new to this domain or new to the startup ecosystem in India?
So two things. One, remember that there is nobody who is more intelligent or less intelligent than you, right? Ultimately, don't look up and look down, right? Everybody is an equal in that sense. Second, uh, ask yourself the question every day, right? What is this business adding to the world, right? What innovation, what solution am I bringing to the world which is different? Because there's nothing wrong with building a highly successful business which is not different, right? So, for example, there are 100 companies which sell, dal chawal. Every company is good. Every company is making money, right? There's no problem. So, if you want to start a business like that, great. But if you want to start a business which you want to build into a unicorn or a really large business, then you need to ask the question every day: how am I making the world a different or a better place?
Correct.
And if the answer to that question is that you're not, then you need to really step back and think about why you're not making a difference and how you can make a difference.
Correct. So I think that's a good note to end this live conversation. It's been an amazing 1 hour discussing legal compliances
Thank
with you.
you,
Okay.
Prithvi. It's been phenomenal. Really
Correct.
enjoyed myself.
And this was the first time that we are actually doing a live interview on Backstage Millionaires. So everyone who stepped in, everyone who joined, thank you very much for this, and thank you very much for the kind of love that you have been giving us for last 1 month. We have almost like grew 5x in last 1 month. So Thank you very much. Happy Diwali and good night, and I'll see you in the next video.
Happy Diwali, guys. Enjoy and take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rishikesh.
Thank you.